my name is Jack Eidelot. I'm a chef in the Conferences and Catering Department at the University of New Hampshire. I'm here today to introduce you to quiche. So this episode is titled, Don't Worry, It's Just Quiche, because quiche is very easy to make. In fact, don't even call it quiche. Call it baked egg custard. Makes it sound simpler, doesn't it? And it is. To make a crustless quiche, all you're going to need are some eggs and some dairy, and then whatever you happen to have lying about in the refrigerator for your ingredients. It's a great way of cleaning out the fridge. If you go on to making the crust quiche, we're going to need a little bit of AP flour, all-purpose flour, butter, pinch of salt, and a little bit of ice water. And it's that simple. So let me get a few of these ingredients together, and we'll go on to making the batter for the crustless quiche. I have some ingredients sliced up and ready to go. I'm going to be using criminy mushrooms, diced onions, diced peppers. I'm going to saute those up, and just at the end I'm going to toss a little bit of spinach in. The idea is we're going to cook off a little bit of the moisture that's in the vegetables, and we're going to give them a little bit of flavor from that sauteing. Now I'm just going to pause here for a second because I want to reiterate, these are the ingredients I want to have in my quiche today. They're not the ones you have to have in yours. So whatever you happen to have in your refrigerator will work for you. Maybe you have some leftover grilled onions and peppers from the night before. You have some cheese in there that you really want to use up. Perhaps you have some fresh herbs growing. Anything you want to put in your quiche, put in your quiche. My goal today is just to give you a base outline of how to make a quiche, give you some ratios, and you can plug and play from there. So I'm going to get these sauteing. I have some olive oil in here already and a little bit of kosher sea salt. I'm going to get them onto the stove now. And now we'll start on our batter. Okay, we are talking about using ratios instead of just exact ingredients. So while I am going to give you some measurements, what I want you to understand is the ratio. Oftentimes with a quiche, the ratio of eggs to liquid or dairy is a 1 to 2. So if you used 1 cup of eggs, you'd be using 2 cups of dairy. In conferences and catering, I make a lot of quiche, and I want it to be bulletproof. So I actually reduce the ratio a little bit on the dairy. So I go to a 50-50. So in this case, we're going to use 1.5 cups of eggs to 1.5 cups of dairy. It makes it a little bit more reliant. I don't have to worry that if I'm making 40 quiche that, oh dear, there's too much moisture because one of the vegetables is bleeding out, and I suddenly end up with wiggly jiggly quiche and 100 people that are not very happy with me at the moment. So we're going to do 1.5 cups of eggs to 1.5 cups of dairy. So I'm going to crack these eggs. In general, a large egg like these is going to be about 1/4 cup. So I know I probably need about 6 of these, but I'll know better in just a second. Alright, so yeah, need 1 more egg. And we don't have to be exact, but at least for this episode, we should probably have 1.5 cups. So 1.5 cups of eggs, toss it in there. Dairy, now you can use whole milk for all of it, but honestly, a little bit of cream goes a long way to making a beautiful, rich, and creamy quiche. I'm just going to add that in there. Take a little bit of salt and pepper, kosher sea salt, a little cracked black pepper. Once again, you can put any type of seasoning you want in there. Cayenne pepper, dash of nutmeg's wonderful. And we're just going to whisk that up. Now, in catering, as I said, when I'm making tens of quiche at a time, you won't see me there with one giant balloon whisk. I actually use a blender. So I highly recommend it. Oftentimes your blender will have measurements right on it, so you can add your 1.5 cups of eggs and your 1.5 of dairy right into the blender and save yourself a dish. So these will be ready in just a second, and we'll talk about pans. Okay, the vegetables have finished sauteing. I threw the spinach in right at the end. We have some nice color on those onions. Lots of good umami flavor starting up. I'm going to put those aside for a second while we talk about the dishes that we're going to use. So today, I'm going to use a classic deep dish pie dish. This is 10 inches diameter and about 1.5 inches deep. You could also use a tinfoil pie pan. A quiche is basically a custard or a casserole, in this case an egg casserole. So you could use a casserole dish. Whatever you happen to have lying around, as long as it's oven safe, you can bake in it, and that can be your quiche dish. So we're going to put this together right now and pop it in the oven. I'm going to grease this. You can use butter, oil, just using some vegetable spray because it's really quick. We're going to toss in the vegetables here, putting about a cup or so in. I'm going to reserve the rest for the quiche that we'll be making next. In addition to that, we're going to add in some sliced scallions. Because this is going to be a vegetarian quiche, there's not going to be a lot of beefy umami flavors. I'm going to be adding some sun-dried tomatoes, which help to replicate that kind of strong, savory flavor. And for a little saltiness and a little bit more creaminess, some feta cheese. Going to pour the egg batter in. I'm going to use spatula. Stir the ingredients around. We're going to toss that into an oven at 325 degrees. That's probably going to take about 45 minutes, but we're going to check it after 25 just to be safe. Everybody's ovens are different. Just because your oven says 325 doesn't mean it's exactly cooking at 325. Could be 300, could be 350. Always best to double check halfway through, see how things are cooking. Okay, the timer's just gone off. We're going to check the quiche and see how far along we are. So as we expected, it's not done. The middle is still very liquid. However, the outside's starting to cook. So I think it's coming along pretty well. We're going to give it another 15 minutes in the oven, and then we'll check it. The key is we don't want to overbake it. All right, we'll come back in 15 minutes. It's been another 15 minutes for a total of 40 minutes. The quiche should be just about ready. Let's take a look. All right, perfect. That last 15 minutes, it went from wiggly to fully cooked. So that's a total of 40 minutes at 325 degrees. We're going to let this cool down for about an hour, and then we can cut it into pieces and serve it. If you'd like, you could make this up to 2 days in advance. So when it comes out of the oven, let it cool down, cover it with some saran wrap, put it in the fridge. When it comes time to reheat it, turn your oven to 250 degrees. Cut the quiche before putting it in the oven, because it's always easier to cut when it's in a cooled state. And put it in at 250 for 25 minutes. It should be heated up and ready to go. That way you can make the quiche, say, on Friday afternoon after work, and it's good to go for brunch on Sunday. For the next quiche, we're going to be making a crust. Now, this is not to intimidate you at all. This is very, very easy to do. So, we're going to start by measuring out 2.5 cups of AP flour, all-purpose flour. There's 1, 2, 1.5. To that flour, we're going to add a little bit of kosher salt. About a teaspoon is good. And 12 tablespoons of butter, just cut into chunks. So there are 8 tablespoons in a stick, so this is a stick and a half of butter. And you could use Crisco or another vegetable shortening, or margarine if you wanted, but butter is by far the best. So we need to cut this into the flour. Now, when you're cutting flour, you can use your hands, you can use a pastry cutter, or you can use a Cuisinart or food processor. Food processor is by far the easiest to use. So we're going to toss it right in there. Now, the advantage of the food processor over using maybe your hands is we want to keep the butter as cold as possible. So the butter's ice cold, flour is room temperature, and if we use our hands, we're actually warming up the butter. And what we're trying to do is turn this into a nice meal where the butter is still in little teeny tiny bits. So when it cooks in the oven, it produces a little steam as it melts, and that makes a little bit of a gap between the layers of flour and makes a nice flaky crust. If you warm up the butter, it's going to just get soaked right into the flour, and you're going to end up with kind of a pasty, very dense or tough crust. So we're going to pulse this a few times in the food processor. And that was fast. And you have this nice, you can just see a nice mealy crust, almost like a very rough cornmeal. So now we're going to add the liquid. I did mention we don't want to warm this up. So to it, we're going to add some ice water. Now, this is a pretty common way of adding the water by chilling it down. There are some recipes that call for using some more exotic ingredients like chilled vodka, which also works very well, but not everybody has vodka at home, and most of us have ice and water. So I'm adding 5 tablespoons of ice water. We may need to add a little bit more, and I'm going to be adding 1 egg white. So we're just going to strain that right out of the eggshell, like so. And the egg yolk I'm going to save for the quiche batter. Put that right there. And we're going to pulse that together. It's going to need just a little bit more water. So I'll add 1 more tablespoon. That's a total of 6. There, you can see it's starting to come together. We don't want to overwork it because that blade whipping through the flour, that creates friction, which creates heat. And remember, we don't want to heat this up. In fact, we are going to chill this down immediately. So I'm just going to form this into a little bit of a ball. Get all those little bits. I'm going to press it down into a disc. The disc is going to help us, a little nice round disc is going to help us roll it out later on. So I'm going to wrap this in saran wrap, put it in the fridge for a minimum of an hour, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, the dough has come out of the refrigerator. I took it out about 25 minutes ago after it had a chance to chill for an hour. Taking it out a little bit ahead of time is going to make rolling it out easier. So to roll the dough, you're going to need a rolling pin. Now, if you don't have a rolling pin, which not everybody does, a bottle of white wine will work for you. Why do I say white? Because commonly white wine bottles have this sort of shape. They don't tend to taper. So it's actually easy to push it and roll the dough out. Now, I'm fortunate enough to have a rolling pin, so that's what I'm going to be using. But just a little idea for you, in case you don't. So we're going to put a tiny bit of flour on here. We don't want to use too much flour, just to keep it from sticking. We're going to start rolling this dough. And as we do it, we're going to move the dough around. And the minute you see that dough not moving, grab a little bit of flour, toss it on, just a little bit. We're going to roll this out, and we're going to be using for the quiche with the crust, a 9-inch pie plate. It's about 1.5 inches deep. So this dough is probably going to be a little too much, but don't worry. I'll show you what to do with the extra. You see how easy this is? Once again, you can do this with a wine bottle too. See how it's moving? It's not as wide as my rolling pin, but it will work in a pinch. Besides, don't press your friends. But once again, easier. Now this is, I noticed, just starting to stick, so we're just going to toss a little bit of flour in there, just a little bit. We want to have as much butter in that dough as possible, so it's good and flaky and buttery. Now, whatever size dish you're using, you want to make sure that the dough is about 1.5 inches wider because it has to fall into the actual dish. So that's just about perfect right there. Now this dough is strong enough you can actually pretty much pick it up and drop it right in. Now, we're going to move it into the corners here. I'm not going to push on it because I don't want to stretch out that part of the dough there and create a crust that's very thin. So we're just going to let the dough kind of flop down in. I'm going to lift it up. I'm just going to gently tuck it in. So I'm lifting up the dough and tucking it in. Not stretching it. Let gravity bring the dough down in. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to grab some scissors. We'll trim that dough down and form the crust. So the dough's a little bit too wide. We're going to just take some scissors here and trim around here, taking off the excess. Right. We'll save those scraps. Now we're going to start crimping here. Going to push from the outside in, 2 fingers, just like this kind of motion here. It doesn't have to be perfect. The fact that you went to the trouble to make them a beautiful quiche with dough, I think your friends and family will be quite impressed. So we're going to crimp all around the outside edge, and then I'll show you how to blind bake this. Okay, I finished crimping the edges of the pie crust, and now we're going to blind bake. Now the reason we blind bake is we want this crust to be relatively crispy and flaky, and if we were to just pour the batter into the raw crust, it would come out kind of gooey and soft, and you wouldn't have that nice contrast between the flaky crust and the custardy filling of the quiche. So blind baking is very easy. When we bake this, we also want to make sure the sides don't fall down. As the butter melts, the dough is going to become soft, and your sides could actually start to fall down into your pan. So we're going to put some weights in there. Now, traditionally, you would use pie weights, but a lot of us do not have pie weights. I certainly do not have pie weights. I'm not a baker. But you can use beans. So I'm going to use lentils today. You can use whatever you happen to have lying around. If you have some black-eyed peas that have been sitting in the back of your cabinet for the last 5 years that you kept meaning to use, but you didn't, now's your chance. So we're just going to fill them right in here, kind of push them against the tin foil to the edges so we keep that edge nice and secure. And I'm going to put that into an oven set at 350 degrees and cook it for 20 minutes, which ought to be just about perfect. It'll just started to turn a little bit off-white, slightly brown. I'm going to put that in now. The pie crust is blind baking. Now let's do a little something with these scraps. If you're going to be making some more quiches or pies later in the week, you could just wrap these up in some saran wrap and put them in the fridge, and you'd be all set. You can just add it to your next batch of dough. Now, I don't bake a lot, and I don't want to have this stuff hanging around in my fridge or my freezer, so we're just going to cook them up right now. Put a little bit of flour on here. Just going to roll them out just a little bit thinner. Just a little thinner. And we're going to be making some treats. So I'm going to take some scissors, put them onto a parchment-lined sheet pan. doesn't have to be parchment lined. You could just spray it with or brush it with a little bit of oil. You can certainly make nice little shapes if you want. Honestly, it tastes the same no matter what it looks like. So I've spread these out so they're not touching. I'm going to sprinkle it with a little bit of sugar and a little dash of cinnamon. This is classic. The woman I worked with a long, long time ago, right out of school, she was a farmer. And this is what she used to do with all of her scraps of pie dough. So I always think it's a nice homage to her when I cook these up. Always reminds me of the good old days. So these are going to pop in the oven, also 20 minutes, 350 degrees, and they'll be good to eat later. It's been 25 minutes. We're going to take a look at the quiche and see how it's doing. As expected, it's still very loose in the middle, so we're going to pop it back in the oven for about 15 minutes. All right. I checked the quiche after 15 more minutes, and it still wasn't done, so I reset the timer for 10 minutes, and that makes a total of 50 minutes at 325 degrees. We'll check it now. All right, it's looking pretty perfect. Got some nice browning around the edges. The center's firm. I'm going to put this aside for about an hour to cool down before we can cut it and eat it. And there you have it, easy as can be. The crustless quiche only took 40 minutes at 325 degrees, and the quiche with the crust, 50 minutes at 325 degrees. When both of these are chilled down, they can be stored in the refrigerator for up to 2 days, covered with some saran wrap. And when it comes time to reheat them, cut them while they're still cold and put them into an oven at 250 degrees for 25 minutes. You've seen me make my quiche, now it's time to make your own. Once you've done this a few times, you won't need a recipe anymore. On behalf of the University of New Hampshire, thank you very much for spending your time with me today.